Welcome to Historically Speaking. My name is Jayavardhan Singh, and in this podcast, we talk about everything that is history. So, in this space, I'm going to talk about Hammīra Mahakavya, and we will basically discuss the historical details that are present in this text. And I think before I talk about the historical details, it is important to first understand, to have a basic introduction of the text itself. So the text we are going to discuss is Hammīra Mahakavya. And this text, Hammīra Mahakavya, deals with the glories of Chauhan kings. And the majority of the text covers the reign of the Chauhan king Hammīra. And Hammīra, we all know, ruled the fort of Ranathambara. It was his capital. So the text is in Sanskrit. So there are 14 cantos in this whole text. And the author of this text was a Jain whose name was Nayachandra Suri. So Nayachandra Suri was the author of this text. And when we talk about the date of this text, so the colophon of the oldest script reads that this copy, that is this manuscript, was made for the reading of Nayahams. So this Nayahams in this colophon, we are told, was a pupil of Jayasimha Suri. And this manuscript was copied in the month of Shravan of Samvat for 1542, which would mean 1485 AD. So first of all, we have to first understand that this Jayasimha Suri, whose pupil was Nayahams. So Jayasimha Suri was the grandfather of Nayachandra Suri, which is the author of Hammīra Mahakavya. So from this we can say that this Nayahams, for whom this manuscript was copied, and the author of Hammīra Mahakavya belonged to the same period. So from this we can say that the text most likely was composed just before the date of the copy. So the date of the copy is 1485 AD. So we could assume that it was composed in the late 1480s. So this is the broad or general date which we can surmise. But the exact date, as you can see, is not known. But it is quite clear that the text was not older than this period. So this is the broad overview of the date of the text. And what we see is that the text was first edited in the modern period by Neelakantha Janardhan Kirtane. So he was a great Marathi historian. So he edited this text in 1879. So this is the whole overview of the basic overview of the text itself. Now, coming to the text, so this text, as I have already said, talks about the history of the Chohans. So it is natural that it will also cover the origin of the Chohans. So when the text talks about the origin of the Chohans, it tells us that in Pushkar, Lord Brahma was preparing to perform the sacrifice. And in order to guard this sacrifice, he remembers the sun. And from the rays of the sun, a warrior appears carrying a sword. And this warrior was called Chauhān. So this is how this text explains the origin of the Chohans. Now, this is one origin story of the Chauhān or Chohans, and there are other theories other stories or theories of Chauhan origin as well. So for those of you who are interested to read these multiple theories and what scholars think about these, they can read Dasharatha Sharma's book Early Chauhan Dynasties. So there you will find the different theories of origin of the Chohans. Now, in the Hammīra Mahakavya, the chronology of the different Chauhan rulers is mentioned. But the problem with Hammīra Mahakavya, the chronology which we find in Hammīra Mahakavya is that it is not entirely accurate. And this most likely was due to the fact that there were, we all know, multiple branches of the Chahmans or Chohans. And what appears to be the case is that since Nayachandra Suri is writing this text at the start of 15th or at the mid of 15th century AD. So it would be, I don't think we could assume that he would provide us a credible list of chronologies of multiple of the different Chahman dynasty. And we have to also remember that this was the period when there was no great Chauhan power that existed. So this, I think we should remember that most of the chronologies that we find in Hammīra Mahakavya, there are some problems that are there in these chronologies, and we will see some of the problems and even in some of the historical details, there are some, you can say, mistakes, or these historical details that are provided in Hammīra Mahakavya is not entirely accurate. So basically, the main topic of this space is going to be how this text describes the early invasions or the Muslim invasions and the Chauhan response. So what we see is that there is no such term like Musalman or Muslim that appears in this text. Instead, there are terms like Mlech, Turushk, Yavan, Shak, and Mudgal. So Mudgal appears for the Mongols who took shelter in Ranathambara, but it also appears sometimes for the Delhi Sultanate, the armies of Delhi Sultanate as well. So these 5 terms we see that is used for the Muslims in this text. But interestingly, the 2 terms Shak and Yavan appear most often. So in most cases, we find that the Sultan is described as Shak Raja, or sometimes Yavan Raja, Shakadhipati. So these are the terms which we see that are used for the Sultan and the Muslims in this text. Now, the first reference to Muslims appear in this text in the first canto itself. So this is the 82nd verse. And here we are told that the Chahman ruler Hariraj defeated the Shakraj and conquered the Mugdhpur, conquered this city of Mugdhpur. Now, this Mugdhpur, I was not able to find where this region is located. So I checked a fair bit, but I could not find where this Mugdhpur is situated. But the fact that Hariraj, we are told, defeated the Shakraj. So the text does not provide us the date of Hariraj, but we could guess the date of Hariraj by the next ruler who is mentioned in Hammīra Mahakavya. So Hariraj, we are told, was succeeded by Singharaj. And Singharaj, the son of Singharaj was Vigraharaj II. So we know that he existed at the start of 11th century. From this, we can say that this Hariraj, who for the first time defeated a Shak ruler, so this most likely, this Hariraj existed at the close of 10th century. So from this, this is my personal guess that this encounter with the Shak Raj is most likely the struggle of the Chohans with the Habbaris, who are now the Habbari Arabs who are controlling the Sindh region. Although this is, as I have said, this is guess. There is no evidence for me to prove. But the fact that the chronologies of these two dynasties is similar. So that is how I can say that most likely it is the Habbaris who are described as, or one of the rulers of the Habbaris who are described as the Shakraj, who was defeated by Hariraj. Now there are various instances where we are told that the Shakraj was defeated. Now, I think in most cases there may have been some raids, and Hariraj was able to, successfully defend his territory against this. So this is described as a victory. So this is what I think. The successor of Hariraj from Hammīra Mahakavya, we learn, is Singharaj. Now Singharaj, as from the date which we can guess, probably belongs to the period of the start of 11th century. And the start of 11th century for those of us who are interested in medieval history, know that this was also the period when Mahmud Ghazni was invading deep into India. So here, the Hammīra Mahakavya tells us that Singraj defeated and killed the Shakpati Hetim. So this Shakpati is called Hetim. Now, there is no such Shak or Muslim ruler, but the fact that the date of Singraj aligns with the invasion of Mahmud Ghazni could suggest that most likely there was some encounter between Singraj and Mahmud Ghazni. So the fact that this Hetim was defeated and killed, as according to Hammīra Mahakavya, so I think most likely Singraj encountered Mahmud Ghazni, and there was, I think Singraj was successful, and that is how Hammīra Mahakavya remembers this encounter. Now, the son of Singraj is Vigrahraj. And Vigrahraj, now here you will see how, there are some of the details in this text is not as accurate as we would like it to be. So for example, Vigrahraj, we are told that he killed the Chalukya or Solanki ruler Moolraj. Now we all know that from other sources, it is quite clear that Moolraj was not killed by Vigrahraj. But it does appear that there was this great contest that was going on between the Chalukyas and the Chauhans. And in this contest, the Chauhans had a upper hand. And the fact that, there is this other text which I have already talked about, Prabandh Chintamani. So Prabandh Chintamani was a text that was written in Gujarat. And here also we see that, there is this allusion to the fact that Moolraj did not fare well against the Chauhans. So the fact that a text which was composed in Gujarat, so we would naturally assume that there would be a Gujarati bias to this text, Prabandh Chintamani. So even the fact that this Prabandh Chintamani talks about the upper hand of the Chauhans suggests that Moolraj did not fared well against Vigrahraj. Although it is certainly true that Moolraj was not killed by Vigrahraj. So here I think it is important. So this I think is an important example for us to see that the text and the details we read in these texts should be cross-checked. So it is important for us to cross-check these details. Now, since we are talking about the reference of invasions in this text, so the first time we have the term Sahabdin. So this is the Shakraj Shahabdin. So this is the term in Sanskrit. So I think most of us know by Sahabdin, this text is referring to Shihabuddin Gauri. So this Sahabdin first time appears in the reign of Durlabh Raj. And according to Hammīra Mahakavya, Durlabh Raj defeated and captured Sahabdin. Now here again you will see how inaccurate this text is. So Durlabh Raj, from other sources, we can date his period to the late 11th century. So this is the period when Durlabh Raj reigned. Late 11th century. But for those of you who are aware of Shihabuddin Gauri's reign, Shihabuddin Gauri reigned at the end of 12th century. So this is the gap. So there is this gap of 70 years between these two rulers. And what I think is that here Naichandra Suri, the author of Hammīra Mahakavya, has confused Shihabuddin Gauri with a Ghaznavid ruler whose name was Ibrahim. And this Ghaznavid ruler, he undertook a massive campaign in the Indian subcontinent. And this we learn from Firishta's history. So most likely the Shaka ruler who fought against Durlabh Raj was this Ibrahim, this Ghaznavid ruler Ibrahim, not Shihabuddin Gauri. Shihabuddin Gauri came some 70 years later. So this I think is these are two great examples to show that this text is not entirely accurate. Now, Coming to the reign of Prithviraj Chauhan, so the third canto is mostly devoted to the struggle of Prithviraj Chauhan and Sahabuddin or Shihabuddin Gauri. The story starts with with this scene that Shihabuddin Gauri has now conquered various rajas, and these defeated rajas are now in the court of Prithviraj Chauhan. And we are told that, here, this Sahabdin has conquered the earth, and he has made Mulsthan his capital. So Mulsthan is Multan. Now, this detail is interesting and accurate because the first massive campaign or significant campaign of Shihabuddin Gauri was in 1175, and this was directed towards Multan. So this fact is quite accurate in Hammīra Mahakavya. So these different kings who are defeated by Shihabuddin Gauri are now in the court of Prithviraj Chauhan, and they ask help with the struggle against Shihabuddin Gauri. So finally we are told that Prithviraj Chauhan accepts and he starts preparing for war, and soon he is marching his army to meet the army of Shihabuddin Gauri. Now here in the third canto, verse 24, there is this description of the Shaka Warriors, or here the term Yavan soldiers is used. So the verse goes like this: the Yavan soldiers, while riding their horses, carried bright colored bows, and on their waist a big quiver was tied. And these Yavana soldiers were great archers. This fact, I think, is an interesting fact, and this is also shows that there is this admiration of horse archer that is present even in Indian text. So I think this detail is an important detail concerning how these horse archers operated. So this first clash between Shihabuddin Gauri and Prithviraj Chauhan was won by Prithviraj Chauhan. And in total, we are told that Prithviraj Chauhan was able to win 7 battles. So 7 battles are won by Prithviraj Chauhan against Shihabuddin Gauri. And in the 8th campaign, we are told that Shihabuddin Gauri was able to capture Delhi. Now here, there is no defeat of Prithviraj Chauhan that has happened yet. Now this is according to Hammīra Mahakavya. So Shihabuddin Gauri has already captured Delhi. Or interestingly, that the text Hammīra Mahakavya, the term for Delhi is Dilli, not Yoginipura or Delhi, guys would like it to be. So this, I think, is an important fact, that here the term used is Delhi, not Delhi. So after this capture of Delhi, Prithviraj Chauhan's he mounts a campaign against Shihabuddin Gauri. Prithviraj Chauhan has a massive army with him, and now Shihabuddin Gauri realizes that he will not be able to achieve success against Prithviraj Chauhan's army. So what he does is that he bribes the head of Prithviraj Chauhan's stable, horse stable there, that is, and also the Turya players. So Turya is a musical instrument that is played in war. And after this incident, Shihabuddin Gauri mounts a night attack on the camp of Prithviraj Chauhan. Now the story goes, according to Hammīra Mahakavya, that against this night attack, Prithviraj Chauhan mounts his horse. And what happens is that when Prithviraj Chauhan is on his horse, these Turya players who were bribed by Shihabuddin Gauri, they began to play their music. Now what this does is that this frightens the horse of Prithviraj, and because of this, Prithviraj Chauhan was not able to fight fully. And we are told that eventually Prithviraj Chauhan is captured. So this is how the struggle of Shihabuddin Gauri and Prithviraj Chauhan is portrayed in Hammīra Mahakavya. Now the end of Prithviraj Chauhan is described in a vague manner in this text. So what happens is that we are told that he was imprisoned by Shihabuddin, and after this there is this vague verse where we are told that Prithviraj Chauhan went to heaven. There is no mention of whether Shihabuddin Gauri had murdered him or how he died. There is no mention of this fact. So this is how the struggle of Prithviraj Chauhan and Shihabuddin Gauri is portrayed. Now, after Prithviraj Chauhan, the text talks about a king named Hariraj. And we are told that this Hariraj performed the last rites of Prithviraj. And soon he conquered the entire earth. So this is how, this text, Hammīra Mahakavya has described about Hariraj. There is no, but what we see is that there is no mention of who Hariraj was. What was his relation to Prithviraj? Now, from other sources, we know that Hariraj was the younger brother of Prithviraj Chauhan. So, coming back to Hammīra Mahakavya. So, Hammīra Mahakavya tells us that Hariraj, has conquered the entire earth. And after this conquest, he became much more involved in worldly affairs. So he neglected his kingly duties, and that is why his servants left him. And because of this, or seeing this, the Shakraj who was residing or who was ruling Delhi. So here again the term Delhi is used. So this Shakraj who was ruling Delhi attacked. This attack led to the defeat of Hariraj, and here we find that the first mention of Jauhar appears in this text. Now here the term Jauhar is not used. We are just told that the queens of Hariraj, they burned themselves simply. So this is what is mentioned in Hammīra Mahakavya. Now, according to Hammīra Mahakavya, after the death of Hariraj, his ministers decided to move from Shakambari Nagari to Ranasthambapur. So earlier, so all of this was happening in Shakambari Puri. So the Shakambari Nagar, according to Hammīra Mahakavya. Now in Ranasthambapur or Ranathambara, we are told that Prithviraj Chauhan's son Govindraj was ruling. And this Govindraj, according to Hammīra Mahakavya, was expelled by the father of Prithviraj. So what happens is that now the Shakambari Nagari was destroyed by the Shakas who was ruling Delhi. So now because of this, the ministers of Hariraj, they with Hariraj's treasure and his army, they moved to Ranasthambapur. So in Ranasthambapur, Govindraj was ruling. So this is the story which is presented in Hammīra Mahakavya. Now I think I will briefly talk about what is the actual details that we learn from other sources. So Hammīra Mahakavya here is not accurate. So what happens if we look at Persian sources and other sources is that after the defeat of Prithviraj Chauhans by the Turks appointed Govindraj the ruler of Ajmer. So this is also accepted by Dasharatha Sharma, who wrote a book on the Chohans. So Govindraj became the ruler of Ajmer. And what happens is that Hariraj, who was the younger brother of Prithviraj Chauhan, he defeats Govindraj and drove him out from Ajmer. Now Hariraj has captured Ajmer, and Govindraj now goes to Ranasthambapur or Ranathambara. So, Ajmer was under the rule of Hariraj for a moment. But soon we find that, the Turks have again besieged the city of Ajmer, and eventually Ajmer was captured by the Muslim army or the Sultanate army. But Hariraj was able to escape. And since after this defeat from the Ajmer region, he tries to conquer the Ranathambara, the fort of Ranathambara, where Govindraj was ruling. So, but he was not able to conquer this fort because the Turks were able to successfully defeat the Hariraj. And also we find that, Hariraj did not stop there. He also mounted a campaign to capture Delhi itself. So now this was happening around 1194 AD. Now 1194 AD is an important period is because so most of the Delhi Sultanate army is involved in the campaigns against the Gahadwals in the east. So because of this, Hariraj thinks that now it is his now he could gain advantage against the Turks. But what we see is that because of the fact that he did not mount a so this is what Dasharatha Sharma believes, and I agree with him, is that Hariraj was not able to mount a decisive campaign. He allowed his army to disintegrate, and that is why we see that the Turks were able to defeat these different armies, these smaller army, separately, and that is why we see Hariraj eventually failed, but he again tried to retake Ajmer, and there is this reference which suggests that eventually he was able to capture Ajmer, but this captured so this siege did not, or his control of Ajmer did not last long, and finally we are told that Hariraj was defeated and he was killed during this last struggle. Now, so this, from this whole episode, we basically learn that Govind Raj, after getting defeated by Hariraj, moves from Ajmer to Ranathambara. So now our story, from Hammīra Mahakavya starts again. So we are told that Govind has a son whose name is Valhan, and he succeeds Govind Raj. Now, from other sources, we learn that Govindraj and his son Valhan recognized the supremacy of Delhi Sultanate. So they did not try to become independent of the Delhi Sultanate. But the hostilities between Delhi Sultanate and the Chohans of Ranathambara or Ranathambara started during the fourth ruler. So this ruler had the name Veer Narayan. Now, Veer Narayan, according to Hammīra Mahakavya, the Shaka king named Jalaluddin marched towards Ranathambara, but he was not able to capture the city of Ranathambara. Now, this Jalaluddin of Hammīra Mahakavya is not Jalaluddin Khilji. So Jalaluddin Khilji came quite later. Most likely, Veer Narayan encountered Iltutmish during this period. And according to Hammīra Mahakavya, we are told that this Shakraj, because he realized that he will not be able to conquer Ranathambara, so he devised a stratagem. So what he does is that he invites Veer Narayan in Delhi. And we are told that Veer Narayan has an advisor whose name is Vagbhat. So Vagbhat was also his uncle. So Vagbhat tells Veer Narayan that he should not go because there is this danger that this Shakraj might capture him or might poison him. But Hammīra Mahakavya tells us that Veer Narayan didn't listen to Vagbhat and he went on to insult Vagbhat. So because of this insult, Vagbhat left the city of Ranathambara and he moved to Malwa, where he took service in the court of the Malwa king. So Veer Narayan, he does not listen to Vagbhat and he goes to Delhi. And there in Delhi, according to Hammīra Mahakavya, he was poisoned by the Shakraj. Now, Hammīra Mahakavya tells us that this Shakraj had also planned to kill Vagbhat also. And because of this, there was this conspiracy between this Malwa ruler and the Shakraj. So there was this plan that this Malwa ruler would kill Vagbhat also. But Vagbhat, since he is a smart person, he became aware of this conspiracy and he was able to kill the Malwa ruler. So Veer Narayan is dead. Ranathambara is, there is no king in Ranathambara. So what happens is that the Shakas or the Yavanas, that is Hammīra Mahakavya uses these terms. So the Yavanas have now conquered Ranathambara. So to capture Ranathambara once more, now Vagbhat from Malwa mounts a campaign and he besieges the city of Ranathambara. Now we should understand that now this is not mentioned in Hammīra Mahakavya, but this was most likely the period after the death of Iltutmish. So there is this great struggle that is going on in Delhi. So this, I think, Vagbhat was able to. Now, all of the story of the Malwa ruler and his conspiracy to kill Vagbhat may not be true, but the fact that Iltutmish was able to conquer Ranathambara is certainly true. Now, from this we also can say that the Chohans after Iltutmish's death was able to recapture the fort of Ranathambara, and most likely it was Vagbhat who captured this fort. So if you look at Hammīra Mahakavya tells us that Vagbhat laid siege to the fort of Ranathambara. And here what is interesting is that this text first time mentions the use of guns. So this is interesting because in Amir Khusro's account, particularly his account of the siege of Ranathambara by Alauddin Khilji. So there Amir Khusro tells us that the Rajputs of who were defending the fort of Ranathambara were using some type of a gunpowder. So this is the reference which we see in Amir Khusro. And most scholars believe that this gunpowder was not actually used by the Rajput themselves, but these were used by the Mongol soldiers who were taking shelter in Ranathambara. So this is what we see, this is what some scholars believe. Now they have ignored this reference from Hammīra Mahakavya. Now Hammīra Mahakavya tells us about the fact that Vagbhat, before the period of Alauddin Khilji, is using some type of a gunpowder or some type of a cannon. Now this would suggest that most likely, now this is my guess, that the Rajputs may have learned the art of using gunpowder from the Mongols who we all know, they started making raids on India by the time of Iltutmish. So most likely during the period of Iltutmish, there was some contact between the Mongols and the Rajputs, and the Rajputs were able to learn the use of gunpowder, and that is what we see in Hammīra Mahakavya. So the fact that Vagbhat was laying siege to the fort of Ranathambara and he is using some type of gunpowder suggests. So this is what I think that might have happened. So coming back to Vagbhat's siege, we are told that, according to Hammīra Mahakavya, the siege lasted for around 3 months, and eventually Vagbhat was able to conquer the fort of Ranathambara. Now Vagbhat is important to us is because the main hero of this text, Hammīra, was the grandson of Vagbhat. So now, we are going to talk about our main character, Hammīra. So Hammīra, according to Hammīra Mahakavya, he ascended the throne of Ranathambara in Vikram Samvat 1339. So this would mean 1282 AD. So this is the period, this is the date of Hammīra's accession to the Ranathambara throne. Now in the initial phases, we are told according to Hammīra Mahakavya that he went on a Digvijay. Now, it is entirely clear that there was no such Digvijay, but what appears to be the case is that he went on some type of a multiple raids. Now, this could be certain. And there is this interesting phase that appears, in Hammīra Mahakavya, that the lake of Shakambari became a salt mine because the tears of the wives of Hammīra Mahakavya's enemies. So because of the tears of the wives of Hammīra's enemy, the lake of Shakambari became a salt mine. So this is what Hammīra Mahakavya have to tell. us about Hammir's Digvijay. So, now the interesting part comes is the first invasion of Ranthambore during the reign of Hammīr. Now here, the first time we are also, Hammira Mahakavya mentions Alauddin. So this is the term which appears in Hammira Mahakavya. And Alauddin also has his general whose name is Ullu Khan. So from these two names, Alauddin is for Alauddin Khilji and Ullu Khan is Ulugh Khan. So Ulugh Khan, we all know, was one of the generals of Alauddin Khilji. So interestingly, Hammira Mahakavya tells us that this Ullu Khan was the brother of Alauddin. So here also, this slight inaccuracy that we see. Now the date which we are talking about, the period when Alauddin invaded Ranthambore, was the period of 1290 to 300. So this is the period of the first invasion particularly. So the account of first invasion, according to Hammira Mahakavya, the Sultanate army was 80,000 strong cavalry. So cavalry is the dominant force which we see in Hammira Mahakavya's description. And Hammira Mahakavya tells us that the Sultanate army did not cross the Varanasi river. So Varanasi river is the name of the modern river Banas. So if you look at the map, you will see that Banas river, so in the south of Banas, in the southern bank of the river Banas lay the fort of Ranathambara, and north of it lay Delhi. So this invasion happened from north to south axis, and what we see is that according to Hammira Mahakavya, Sultanate army did not cross the Varanasi river. So they are now camping at the northern bank of Banas river. And here we are told that the Sultanate army burnt down villages and also wheat crops. And this continued for 18 days. Now, when the Chohans, they went on against this Sultanate force, Hammīr was not leading this force. And the reason for this that is provided in this text is that Hammīr had because he was performing a certain religious rite. So this is what we see in Hammira Mahakavya. Now here what we see is that Hammira Mahakavya describes the battle between the Sultanate army and the Chauhans. So there is this allegory that the battle between Kshatriyas and Shaka is like the battle between the Devas and the Asuras. And here, the text mentions that chariots are fighting with each other. But we all know that, during this period, there was no chariots that were being used. So this is the fact that this text uses chariot this is just used as a trope. There is no, we are pretty sure that no chariots were used during this fight. Now here, interestingly, what happens is that since Hammīr is not leading the battle, one of his ministers, whose name is Bhim Singh, he is leading the battle. And we are told that when the Shaka warriors knew that they will no longer be able to survive, they put grass in their mouths and started saying that I am your cow, I am your cow. Now for Bhim Singh, what happens is that he made a serious error during this struggle. So what appears to be the case is that because of the initial successes of the Chauhan army, Bhim Singh thought that he had won the entire battle. So what happens is that now he ordered that the kettle drums should be sounded. And because of this, the Sultanate army was able to regroup and reassemble, and they mounted a counterattack. Now, eventually, we are told that, Bhim Singh was able to successfully defend and he eventually, defeated the the Sultanate army. But in doing so, he lost his life. Now, after this whole battle is over, now when the news reached Hammīr, he is very angry. And the main reason for his anger is that, first of all, this anger is directed toward another of his minister, whose name is Dharm Singh. So Dharm Singh was accompanied by Bhim Singh. So we all know that Bhim Singh has already died. So Dharm Singh is the only other leader that has survived, and Hammīr is very angry with Dharm Singh. And the reason why is that Hammīr believes that Dharm Singh allowed Bhim Singh to leave his stronghold, and he did not see how strong the Muslims were. That is, they misjudged. Basically, what Hammīr is telling Dharm Singh is that he misjudged the battle, and because of this misjudgment, a considerable Chauhan force is now lost, and even one of the great generals of the Chohans, whose name is Bhim Singh, he is also already dead. And in order to punish Dharm Singh, we are told that Hammīr blinded him, and there were other things that were done to Dharm Singh. So because of this treatment, Dharm Singh is quite angry, and now eventually we find that Dharm Singh is no longer part of the council of Hammīr, and Hammīr appoints a new advisor whose name is Bhojdev. Now, after some time, we see that Hammīr realized that he may have gone a bit too far in treating Dharm Singh. So he recommissions or takes back Dharm Singh in his service. But Dharm Singh did not forgive Hammīr, and he was able to successfully incited Hammīr against the new advisor, whose name is Bhojdev. So we are told that Hammīr now insults Bhojdev, and because of this insult, Bhojdev now goes to the court of Sultan of Delhi. And here, the first invasion of Alauddin is not successful. So Alauddin is itching for battle, and he asks Bhojdev that what should he do. So Bhojdev tells Alauddin is that what you should do is that you should immediately try to attack the fort of Ranathambara. And the reason which Bhojdev gives is that currently the sowing season is underway, and if Alauddin was able to destroy the countryside, Hammīr would naturally fall. Now, because of most of the resources will be destroyed, Hammīr would eventually fall. So this is the simple reasoning of Bhojdev. So because of this advice, the second invasion begins, and now Ulugh Khan again is the general, Ulugh Khan or Ulugh Khan, and he now has 1 lakh cavalry. So 20,000 horses are increased. And during this second invasion, Ulugh Khan was able to capture the city of Hindwat. So this is the term which is used. So this is the city which is used in Hammira Mahakavya. Now, if you look at other sources, it appears that this was some type of a settlement that was situated on the pass towards the city of Ranathambara. And this pass was also called the Pass of Hindwat. So it appears that the army of Ulugh Khan was able to successfully enter this pass, and they now laid siege to the city of Ranathambara itself. Now, the city of Ranathambara, the Sultanate army is laying siege to this city. And here what happens is that Hammīr, in order to defeat Ulugh Khan's army, he carry out a night attack on the army of Delhi Sultanate. And in this night attack, we are told that Hammīr burned down the camp of Ulugh Khan. And although Ulugh survived and he returned to Delhi, but the Chohans were able to capture large number of Yavan women. And what they did to these women is quite interesting. So, according to Hammīra Mahakavya, we are told that the Chauhans made these Yavana women sell buttermilk. So, here the term Yavan woman is used, and they made them sell buttermilk in every village. Now, I personally don't know what does that mean. So, if you have any idea or any reference, what could it mean that they have to, they made to, so these Yavana women had to sell buttermilk in every village. So you can probably tell me also. So this is the second invasion of Alauddin that failed. The third invasion, we find that this time Alauddin came in person, and with him was Ulugh Khan and Nusrat Khan. So Ulugh and Nusrat Khan, we all know, were the generals of Alauddin. But here we are told that these two were brothers of Alauddin. And they were able to successfully reach the fort of Ranathambara, and the siege began earnestly. When the siege started, Alauddin sends a emissary, and there are several demands which Alauddin wants Hammīra to concede. So the demands, there are these are the demands which are mentioned in Hammīra Mahakavya. So we are told that Alauddin wanted 1 lakh gold coin, 4 elephants, 300 horses, sheep, his daughter, Hammīra's daughter that is, and in future, Hammīra should follow Alauddin's order. So these are the multiple demands. And when Hammīra did not accept these demands, Alauddin told Hammīra that he should not, fulfill these demands, but he should give back the 4 Mudgals who are residing in the fort of Ranathambara. Now these 4 Mudgals, that is the term that is mentioned in Hammīra Mahakavya. So most likely these were the Mongols who had taken shelter in the fort of Ranathambara. Now this is what Alauddin wants. But the response of Hammīra is also interesting. So Hammīra tells the Sultan and the emissary that he will make sure that the 2 generals of Alauddin will eat pork. So I think this is an important point because it also shows that there was this awareness that for the pork was taboo. So I think that this is an interesting and an important point. So Hammīra rejects these demands of Alauddin, and the struggle, this siege begins. Here again we see that the mention of guns is there. And apart from this, another interesting detail is that we are told that in the fort of Ranathambara, there are large containers of oil, and these containers are being heated. So this is for the defense of the fort of Ranathambara. And after this, we are told that, during the siege, the Shakas also tried to mine the walls of Ranathambara. So this eventually, all of these attempts failed, and this siege went on for 3 months. And one day what happened was that there was a great explosion in the camp of Alauddin. And here we find that because of this explosion, Nusrat Khan was killed. Now this is an interesting and an important detail because we know that during the siege of Ranathambara, Nusrat Khan died. So this is an accurate detail which we see in Hammīra Mahakavya. So again, the siege went on, and there was this attempt by the Sultanate army to dig tunnels, and they also tried to fill the moat of Ranathambara fort. But this does not went as planned, and Rajputs, we are told, counter-attacked with cannons. So here again, and again the reference to guns or gunpowder that is there. Now, 3 months have already passed, and rainy season has begun. And there is this great scene where we are told that, the camp is filled with mud, and the soldiers of the Sultanate army are suffering greatly. So to end this siege, Alauddin tries to gain influence in the court of Hammīr, and he was able to successfully secure the allegiance of one of Hammīr's minister. And this minister, the name of this minister is Ranamal. So Ranamal, we are told, betrayed Hammīr, and he provided some important details about the fort of Ranathambara. But what we see is that even in the fort itself, the situation is not very great, because the supplies in the fort have already ran out. So now, eventually we are told that, Hammīr discovers that Ranamal has betrayed him. So Hammīr now prepares for the final battle. And we also see that there is this preparation of Jauhar that is going on. Now again, the term Jauhar does not appear in this text. There is an important detail here that is mentioned. And here we are told that, when Hammīr met for the last time with his queens, he gave to each of his queens a lock of his hair. And the fact that, or the reason for this, was that we are told that in afterlife, when Hammīr will forget the faces of his queens in front of the Apsaras, these queens will show this lock of hair to remind Hammīr that they are his queens. So this, I think, is an important detail that is there in this text. So eventually we are told that, in the final battle, many great warriors died, and Hammīr, he is injured with arrows, and to avoid capture, he kills himself. So this is how Hammīr has died. Now the 14th canto is where, so this is the last canto, and Naichandra Suri writes these evocative lines, and I think I will like to quote these lines. So he writes, that is the author of Hammira Mahakavya: "After you, O Hammīr, who will protect the cows from these shakers who are killing them? What will happen to them?" Another important verse is that, "O Hammīr, after you have left the earth, the Padma pond is now being polluted by these malechhas." So these are the some of the lines which are mentioned by Naichandra Suri after the death of Hammīr. Now the fact that Hammīr gave shelter to Mongols, and one of the reasons why we are told that the Sultanate army invaded the region of Ranathambara was because that Hammīr did not broke this promise, and he gave shelter to these Mongols. Now this promise of Hammīr became a legend, and there is a verse of whose English translation I will quote, and I think this is an important verse. So the verse goes like this: "A lioness gives birth to a cub only once. Once alone is the word of a good man given. Once only does a plantain bear fruit. A woman is anointed only once with oil for marriage. And once alone did Hammīr gives his irrevocable promise." So I think this is a great verse to end this space.